Pretty cool. Well, when you think of the word leader, what do you think of? Who do you think of? What comes to mind? What do you think the characteristics are of a leader? A mentee once said to me, I feel like the field of UX research is for leaders, but I don't think I'm meant to be a leader. And that was painful to hear because I knew exactly how she felt for a very long time. Creating my YouTube channel was difficult because I didn't consider myself a YouTuber. When I rewatched my recordings to edit, I thought I was too boring, spoke too slowly, no one would want to hear what I had to say, and I was scared of being judged. In fact, I had recorded my first video a year before I ever uploaded it to YouTube because I was scared. I hated how I sounded like on video, and I thought only leaders in the field should make content. Besides, who was I to make videos about UX research? But when I thought about all the people asking me about how to get into the UX research field, I knew I could help, and at scale. At the same time, I was taking a UX leadership class at my master's programs, and it inspired me to think what the word leadership really meant. I had this notion that leaders were masters at public speaking, loud, articulate people wearing suits who are able to direct masses of people. And that's what I thought of when I heard the word leader. And I could have never put myself in those ranks. And I knew that's exactly how my mentee felt. Not everyone wants to be a leader, and that is okay. But when people think they might not be good enough to be leaders, that humility just may be the exact reason why they might end up being the best ones. You don't become a leader from taking a workshop, finishing a class, or reading an article on Forbes, or wearing a suit. To be a leader, we must know what it's like to follow. And since everyone has followed, anyone can be a leader. Lao Tzu said that a leader is best when people barely know that they exist. When their work is done and their aim is fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. We often credit the leaders, but without followers, there are no leaders. According to Forbes, leaders exhibit different actions, like making hard choices, self-sacrifice, pushing people to be their best, helping them grow, and serve a great cause. According to Inc., leadership is a process that maximizes the efforts of others towards a greater good. There are no direct reports, no power or authority, no mention of personality traits, attributes, or titles. Only a greater good. A few more I might add. Being a leader does not mean you are better than others. A leader does not have all the answers, and they don't pretend to. They actively ask questions to mobilize others to achieve a superordinate goal, and in doing so, exhibit vulnerability where others can feel the psychological safety to do the same. Vulnerability in that maybe they've never done this before, they may have fear or of the unknown, but in spite of it, they stand for their values and don't let that fear stop them. There are people who have become leaders not for their titles, but for the movements they have inspired. They are leaders who have certain values and don't tell people what they want to hear. They're ordinary people like me and you. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things, which I know you will. The purpose of this module isn't to give a single definition to leadership. No, it's to show you, us, that there are different kinds of leaders and therefore no all-encompassing qualities. The untold opportunities for the making of a badass UX leader beckon. Across history, we've learned to perceive leadership in certain ways, and I want to introduce you to 3 theories of leadership, starting with what occurs in the natural world, the dominance hierarchy. This leadership theory is typically seen when members of animal social groups create a ranking system. Members either compete for resources and mating opportunities, they're born into power like aristocrats, or fight to become the leader. This type of leadership system is based solely on power and authority. A Machiavellian approach to ruling with fear over ruling with love. And different groups can be on the spectrum.
Would I rather be feared or loved? Easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me.
The next theory, it comes from Thomas Carlyle from the 1840s, who suggested that great leaders are born, not made, that leadership qualities are innate. You either have it or you don't. This was called the great man theory. And he suggested that these leaders have intrinsic characteristics like charisma, intelligence, sociability, and confidence. Nowadays, we know his theory to be scant, inadequate, and quite frankly, damaging. This is the theory, believe it or not, that I believed in, that made me and my mentee think that we are not leaders, because I didn't have that charisma, or so I thought. When I saw people in powerful positions, that's what I thought leadership was, and could not ever imagine myself as a leader of the great man theory. Ever is a very limited construct built upon the dominance hierarchy of power based on fear. Of course, if Carlyle was wrong about the great man theory, then where does that leave us? The evolution of leadership theories brings us to transformational leadership, which basically says anybody could be a leader, that there's no higher or lower rank, and this style is idealized influence, where leaders walk the walk and not just talk the talk. The transformational leader consider the needs of followers and help others to succeed beyond their own interests. When it comes to the range of efficiency and engagement, transformational leadership takes the most engagement and may be very efficient at moving teams along. Now, on the other hand of the spectrum, we have laissez-faire leadership, which is basically letting people do what they want. Now, you might be wondering, why is that a leadership style? Imagine a group of people who are way more experienced than you. You probably want to hear from them and take their suggestions rather than tell them what to do. In the middle of that spectrum, we have transactional leadership, which, when it comes down to it, isn't really leadership more than it is management. Here, in transactional leadership, we're keeping things the same. Don't do your work, get punished. If you do your work, get rewarded. Simple as that. And understanding these theories in depth gives us a healthier look at what leadership means and gives us a 360-degree approach to becoming a badass UX leader, which I emphasize so greatly.
1995, the year Post Malone was born and O.J. Simpson found not guilty. And the same year that Daniel Goleman published his New York Times bestseller, Emotional Intelligence, which stayed on the bestseller list for over a year. In the book, he talks about 6 different leadership styles. And in this module, I want to go through them because it's important to recognize, again, that this job isn't just about understanding our users through research. It's as much about understanding our teammates and stakeholders. And when we recognize the type of working styles there are, we can more easily communicate across divides that can help create trust. Who knows, perhaps this will even help us understand ourselves better too. So the 6 styles are affiliative, visionary, coaching, democratic, coercive/commanding, and pace setting. I'll quickly say that the first 4 styles I mentioned are good defaults. The last 2 styles are bad. I mean, good for certain situations. As I describe each leadership style, think about the times you've seen or used them in the past. I want to be clear though. Everybody has a dominant style, but the best leaders know when and how to switch up their styles in different situations. They know how and when, but also they do it. I know how and when, but it could still be very difficult for me to take on a different style that's usually not me. For example, according to the leadership style quiz, my dominant style is visionary, then democratic, then affiliative, then coaching, then pace setting, and then the commanding style. These styles do not define you, but rather think of them as another tool in your UX leadership toolbox. Because as I got into teaching and mentoring students, I've learned to utilize different styles at different times. I had to. So let's learn about each, the pros and cons of each, and when you might want to channel a certain style. And if you want to find out which is your dominant style, head to this website to take the quick quiz, idealist.org.
Dale Carnegie, author of one of my favorite books, How to Win Friends and Influence People, once said that if you want people to be enthusiastic about your ideas, make it about them, not about you. A great quote that embodies what our work as badass UXers is all about. As we go through the next section on influence, stop and think about stories you can relate to, what you've encountered before,
how and when you can apply these learnings. Fostering strong human relationships only work if you actively apply what you learn in real life. You won't get anywhere just reading things. So why learn about influence in a class about UX research? Although if you haven't already surmised, much of our job is to influence design through means of storytelling and building empathy and compassion for users. Whether you're in a mature UX company or not, we still need to influence our stakeholders on what is best for our users and maybe even what's best for your user research team. There are a couple of great books on how to build relationships practically. Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, which is where we learn about the 6 leadership styles. This one right here, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Real Influence by Mark Goldstein and John Ullman. Exercising Influence by Kim Barnes. Yeah, there's other great books related to UX specifically, like Tom Grieber's book, Articulating Design Decisions, which is awesome. But if you understand the fundamentals of influence, you might not need all the other books. Before we talk about influence, we keep bringing up this term, empathy. What the heck is it? Let's learn about empathy more and see what exactly it has to do with building influence. So please watch a brief video about empathy by Brené Brown, a professor focused on leadership, shame, vulnerability, and empathy. Author of Dare to Lead, Atlas of the Heart, lots of bestsellers that I recommend, especially Dare to Lead, another book I recommend on leadership. Besides this class, teaching a cohort, working, consulting on UX research projects, dabbling with cars, helping old ladies cross the road, and general hooliganism, I also do mock interviews for UX researchers. And one time I did a mock interview with a mentee, and I put all my love and effort into helping them because I really wanted them to succeed. Gave them templates, questions, and coached her through questions and how to answer them. When she didn't get the job, she called me and just crying. I really didn't know what to do, and I felt terrible. It reminded me of when I was going through the transition into UX research, so I knew exactly how she felt. And I told her my story. I'm not sure if it helped, but maybe that's all I can do sometimes. I checked in with her a few days later to see how else I can help, because I still want people to crush their interviews. One doesn't work out, hey, it's okay. You got interviews, that's great. You can get another one. So I offered a quick chat with her again. Without realizing it at the time, the story I just shared, I guess, exhibited 3 types of empathy described by Daniel Goleman in the book Emotional Intelligence. There is 3 types: cognitive empathy, emotional empathy, and compassion. So cognitive empathy is knowing how others feel and think. Emotional empathy is feeling along with the other person. And compassion is one step beyond empathy. In fact, when we talk about empathy in UX, we should really be talking about compassion. When you take the action to help, that's compassion. So not to turn the UX world upside down or anything, but we're really talking about compassion when we're talking about empathy. Empathy is vulnerability transcended by connecting with others while being able to connect with something inside that you can relate to. In UX and design, it translates to being able to know what it's like to be your users. Not just usability-wise, but their contexts, their fears, and motivations too. In leadership, empathy is knowing what motivates or scares your colleagues so that we can garner growth. Empathy is the underpinning to influential leadership, which we'll talk about right now. Influence is to connect with others to build strong relationships. It's not taking selfies or Instagram photos of food, right? The social media influencer. Influence is not, how can I get them to do this for me? And it's certainly not, do this or else. Right? Influence focuses on the other person, or as Goldstein and Ullman puts it, they're there. They're there. The other person's there. The other person's mind, presence, what is their perspective? Depending on how you go about it, it's either persuasion, manipulation, or coercion. But what the heck is the difference? Intent. But why should we care? Well, remember how I say everything in life comes down to semantics and first principles, basically? Okay, not everything in life, but a lot of what we do.
Once we define these, we can be more aware of our actions in the workplace and in your own home. So let's start with the bad ones. Manipulation. Oh, it's already bad. It's getting control for short-term gains, typically for yourself, right? Selfish gains, manipulation. One side wins, one side loses, and there's no cooperation. Okay, that's manipulation. Coercion. I mean, this is the worst kind. It's do it or else. It's forcing or threatening somebody against their will to do something that you want them to do. It's also a crime. So I know none of you will do such thing. So that leaves us with persuasion and influence. What's the difference there? We know manipulation and coercion are bad. Persuasion, influence. It's interesting because I had a hard time distinguishing the two before, but I attended a talk once. I forgot who the speaker was, but they were a leadership expert. And I asked them what they thought the difference was between influence and persuasion. And they gave what I thought was a pretty good response. He said, persuasion is something you do, influence is something you earn. I like that a lot. Persuasion is convincing people to take action even if they might not agree with you, but still they have to eventually agree. Persuasion is disconnected influence. And that's what most business schools and workshops teach. Persuasion makes the other person into an influencing target. Right? It's a target for influence. Persuasion is about getting people to do something your way. Persuasion works for the short term and sometimes is what we do to earn influence later. So if you want a high level of commitment and long-term motivation to your idea, then involve people in the creation of your idea. As we've been learning this whole class, right? Influence, on the other hand. Influence takes time by cooperating with others, understanding their point of views. Long-term, it's a win-win. You're not forcing anybody to align with your objectives and vision. Influence seeks to make authentic connections, allows for dialogue and collaboration to build ideas together, and both parties commit willingly. So how do we gain influence? Let's go over some brief ways in the next lesson. Influence is really just about building relationships. So what are some steps to gain influence? Well, before I jump in, a number of things to remember on your influencing journey. There's no step-by-step, one-size-fits-all process. It's nearly impossible to influence everybody. Otherwise, we wouldn't have wars and a lot of disagreements. You may be right, or only partially right. Be honest with your intentions and expect some resistance. Not everything's going to go smoothly as you try to build relationships, especially with tougher teammates or stakeholders. And the books I recommend, the ones that I did recommend, Real Influence by Mark Goleman, John Ullman, Exercising Influence by Kim Barnes, they define different ways to influence. I'm not going to go into their technical frameworks or snazzy definitions because once you break down all of their points, first principles, it really comes down to two things. First is showing compassion with active listening and providing possibilities and ideas and working together with the other person. In fact, what my mom had always taught me, she said, just be respectful, humble, listen first, don't offend people, don't brag, don't be the first to talk. People will naturally like you, or at the very least, won't give you any trouble. And when you get that respect, then people are more likely to listen to you. So thanks, Mom. Having an open mind is easier said than done, though. But it is important to know that you may not be 100% right all the time. Influential people inspire us to see beyond where we are now to where we could be. They understand where we're at now, where we want to go, and inspire us towards possibility. Maybe even to places we couldn't even imagine ourselves. It's really a blend of all of the leadership styles we talked about. But before you try and go out to convince everyone to join your, Hello Kitty fan club, remember to expect resistance and keep in mind some common tendencies of human beings. People don't like others telling them what to do without asking first, a lot of the times. People may simply resist and do the things it was before because it's easier to just continue doing the things we've always done. People may not commit to any changes based on
principle just to resist it. If the change is imposed directly, it could even create resentment, even if the change was for the better. If you don't work with people to explain your rationale, people won't understand why you're changing things. So here's some practical advice if you want to suggest changes to anything. Start with an affiliative leadership style by asking non-judgmental questions to understand people's perspectives, which is our typical approach to UX research. So why not apply that to anybody? We can ask questions like, what do you think of it now? How did you decide to do this behavior? Have you always had it like this? Why or why not? What would you like your ideal situation to be? Why? Where do you get your inspiration from? Etc. Affiliative leadership, understand the other person. Then you might want to take a democratic leadership approach to offer relevant suggestions and also get their opinions. I think XYZ approach, but what do you think about doing this? What are your thoughts, etc.? Giving people a why usually helps them get closer to where you're coming from. Can you see the resemblance of good leaders to UX research? Like I said, our job inherently requires leadership qualities. So apply the same research approach that you do with participants with your team. Cool, welcome to this lesson. And this lesson, we're gonna go through a thinking exercise. I saw a post in a forum about a researcher who had done a research roadmap workshop with their stakeholder team. This is the prompt, okay? I'm gonna give you the prompt. The person runs a roadmap workshop with their team. In the workshop, it goes really well. You define the timelines, prioritize projects, only come to find a few weeks later, your stakeholders had given it to a different team. All these projects, no longer user research, but now it's marketing or data analytics. Someone else, basically, they said these research questions are for other teams, not for user research. First of all, how would you feel if someone did that? You did all the work, planned the research, here are the research questions that they all came together with, set the timelines, prioritize everything. You had the impression that it was going to be user research who goes and does this product, but the stakeholders gives it to other teams.
Take it.
How would you feel and what would you do? That's a question. So pause the video, think about it, and when we come back, I'll share what other people have said, what I would recommend, and then this is a thinking exercise. In case you ever encounter it, hopefully you don't, but it'd be helpful to kind of think about these things on influence, persuasion, conflict resolution. All right, welcome back. Hope you got some time to think about how to approach this situation. It's a little difficult, I would say, but I'll share some responses from what I see online. Some people, there's two camps, it seems. There's some people who say, just do the research anyway. If you find value in it, they'll come to you. Oh, they'll realize how valuable it is.
Damn you, I will not be ignored! Get back in here! Get back in here and love me! Ah!
On the other camp, there's people who say, well, I wouldn't do research at all if we had no alignment. And there's another camp of people who are like, well, why did they give it away to a different team? Why didn't they raise this concern during the workshop? Or any prompts to that? And was the initial impression that user research was going to do this, but then something changed where they gave it to a different team and you just weren't looped in? So many different approaches. So I'm curious to hear what you thought of. Here's what I personally might do. And there's some really good responses here too. When some people say, well, and like I mentioned in module 3, you don't ask them research questions. You ask them, hey, what are your plans for the next year? What are your product plans? What's your vision? What are your risks and benefits and goals? And what things do you need to do in the next 6 months or 3 months or 9 months or 12 months? What decisions are you going to have to make? Do you anticipate anywhere you might pivot? Or do you anticipate something changing that? A lot of kind of just projection into the future and pre-mortems, so to speak. Definitely, that's the understanding bit when it comes to re-influencing your stakeholders. Understand what was the state of mind when research wasn't involved in their decision here. And you gotta do it. It's something you can't avoid. The action of doing research regardless of their input is, I personally wouldn't, just because, like I mentioned before, if you do research, no one's involved, no one knows what you're doing, you come back and no one really had input to begin with, they're gonna be like, well, where are these questions? Where are these questions? So these things change. What happened to that? A tree falls in the forest, Do you hear it? Right? Exactly that kind of case. If you did research and no one takes action on your recommendations, it didn't happen. Mine is really crucial for any project. It's not like you can go rogue or vigilante researcher and hope to do a great research project and say, oh, they'll see the value. They're probably super busy. Of course, sometimes it might help, but get the buy-in. Involving the stakeholders is an inherent part of what we do. And finally, another approach you could take is, okay, well, since they moved it over to a different team, let me just see if that team needs help or my expertise.
Need some help?
Maybe that other team didn't even know they were supposed to do this. But you do, because you planned all this and prioritized with the team all along. So you can go in there and say, approach it in a friendly manner. It's like, hey, I know you have this research project. I can help. How can I help you? And that could be another approach. So hope that was a good exercise in influencing the research and make sure it goes in the right direction. It can be difficult if you encounter people decisions that leaves you out of the picture. And sometimes maybe it opens up avenues for yourself for research opportunities, as long as the research has been put in appropriate hands, so to speak. Do you want the research because you planned the workshop? Or is the research definitely a research project that you need to take on? I could imagine some sense of ownership. Like, I did the research prioritization roadmap workshop. Like, these are all supposed to be my projects. I would say go with a collaborative approach and say, hey, if you think it makes sense to go there, let me see how I can help. Or here's why I don't think it makes sense, but let the ego go.
My ego.
Your poor spotted ego.
There's no right answer here. There's no one approach that you can take, and that's the point. This is a difficult situation, and I want you to think about how you might approach it, how if any of these ideas inspired a different approach for yourself. Thanks for watching. Again, the research isn't the hard part, people are, which is exactly what the next video is going to be about. So I'll see you there. The hardest thing about user research isn't the research, it's people. Like any job, we can probably do the thing we're hired to do, but people are so
Fucking difficult.
Today, we'll delve into the art of working with stakeholders who might not be as cooperative with research. Remember, we want to create a harmonious and effective working relationship that benefits not just the research team, not just stakeholders, but our end users, who, upon their needs being met, ultimately will have this symbiotic relationship and thus help the company as well. But life isn't always so fine and dandy. What happens if you run into pushback from your own teammates? So let's explore some effective strategies together. First, let's talk about mindset when faced with challenging situations. Remember, research is easy, people are hard. Don't take any resistance personally. Instead, focus on the common superordinate goal we share with our stakeholders. We need to understand their working styles and preferences, employ persuasive techniques that align with their needs. Building influence and trust takes time, so keep a record of your attempts and maintain a positive collaborative approach. The second thing I need to talk about is do the long game. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. Like I mentioned, building influence and trust takes time. That's exactly what we might need. Not every alignment is going to happen immediately. What matters isn't aligning people with our point of view, but aligning on something together. Start by understanding the whys behind any resistance or pushback, and then implement those tactics that can help you achieve your long-term goals. Play the long game, right? It might not happen today. You need to build up relationships, and that takes time. Ask them questions, understand where they're coming from, have them understanding where you're coming from, and then find a solution to move forward together. The third tip for working with people who might not be as cooperative is them. Maybe it isn't you either. Maybe this is just a misunderstanding in clarity and understanding. Misalignment happens because of differences in understanding of what's needed. Sometimes it's the words we're using. Maybe we're assuming the way they're using a certain word is a way that is something else compared to what we're referring to. People have a different definition or perception of something, and that's why I always start by asking how people are defining things to get to the root. So start by clarifying how different stakeholders perceive key concepts to ensure everyone's on the same page.
If everyone's on the same page, then effective discourse can happen. You know, I had a VP who said, "Oh, I don't want to get into semantics right now." And I'm like, well, if none of us understand what your definition of this term is, how can we even begin to understand your process and implementation of it? So you gotta break that down first. Step 4, here's some communication strategy. We'll have a whole module on this next, but the importance of thoughtful communication cannot be emphasized enough. We have to choose our words carefully and steer clear of, phrases that could be perceived as dismissive or belittling, especially during times of disagreement. So the 4th tip I have for you is to be aware when and what language we're using, depending on the level of trust. I say depending on the level of trust because there's 2 ways things can go. Take, for example, these phrases. Well, from a research perspective. Well, from a design perspective. Well, from a insert here perspective. They seem innocuous, right? And I've seen these exact phrases used in 2 different kinds of environments. One where the team had great trust and open-mindedness, and the other where the team didn't have a high level of trust at all. Okay, so do you see? It doesn't matter what you say. It depends on how people might be perceiving it or past history. So these may be great to use when the team is vibing, everybody's having a good time, they're having an open-minded discussion, and they want to hear different perspectives. Right? From a research perspective, I want to hear from the research side. What do you have to say? Oh, I want to hear from the market research side. What do you have to say about it? On the other hand, when relationships aren't at an all-time high, I see people completely go off because maybe they're perceived as dismissive instead, right? Instead of collaboration is now defensiveness. It's like, oh, well, from a research perspective, this is, so how fickle human relationships are, right? Remember, it's not about our point of view. It's not about their point of view. It's about, at the end of the day, trying to do something for the users, ultimately leading to a better business. It can be hard when there's no trust. Everything you say, even if you have the best intentions, could be perceived not good. That's where we might employ the affiliative leadership style. In conclusion, here are the few key principles to foster effective collaboration. Don't be confrontational, carefront. Focus on the overall goals, not somebody's personal goals, including yourself. And if your goals don't align, you gotta go back and understand where you're coming from, where are they coming from, why aren't we aligning? What is it that's forming the rift between us? And then start from there. And also the language of true leaders is honest, open, and compassionate communication. HRDQ is a research-based training program that provides training, and they call it soft skills. I just like to call it human skills. And I want to introduce you the 4 different communication styles because it's useful to 1, improve our interactions with others, 2, recognize what kind of styles you might encounter, your arch nemesis, 3, and perhaps more importantly, it's a way of understanding ourselves too. What makes us tick? What styles do we vibe with, and what styles do we butt heads with? All of this can help influence our success and relationships in a positive way. So let's get into it. Here I'm showing the 4 styles in 2 dimensions, low to high assertiveness and low to high expressiveness. We have direct, spirited, considerate, and systematic. Let's walk through each one. The direct style tells it like it is. There's no mincing words. They're highly conscious of time, mission-oriented, results-driven, and willing to confront issues head-on. Spirited style tends to be enthusiastic, intuitive, very friendly and bubbly, so therefore great building strong relationships, and is an expressive, persuasive, motivating, and inspiring style. The concerted style uses a soft, warm tone of voice. They have good listening skills, they're good team players and managers who use a caring, empathetic, and appreciative style. Last but not least, we have systematic. This is thorough, precise, facts-driven, organized, and diplomatic. So they typically won't get on everyone's bad sides and mind their own business. Sounds great. I bet you could probably pinpoint which is your dominant style. But just as we have positives with each style, we have negatives as well. Or rather, instead of negative, let's call it blind spots. Direct communicators tend to be poor listeners, likes control and competition, may be impatient, discounts feelings, doesn't mind arguing. The spirited communication style focuses on the big picture, tends to forget the details, they tend to exaggerate in generalizations, maybe procrastinate, responds poorly to criticism. Considerate communication style avoids conflict, might give in easily, resists change, they emphasize feelings, and tends to keep opinions to oneself. And finally, last but not least, we have the blind spots for the systematic communicator, which is they focus too much on the fine details and they care about logic over emotions, terse and risk averse. Think of a friend. I bet you could probably pinpoint which style they have, your manager, your colleague, maybe yourself. But there's a lot more to these styles than just verbal communication. Paraverbal too, body language, and also personal space. And I'm also wondering if you could draw any parallels to the leadership styles we spoke about in the previous module. I'm not sure if there's any significance to this, but it seems to me that direct communicators might take on a commanding leadership style. Systematic communicators might be the pace setters. Spirited might be visionary leadership style, where considerate communicators might have a mix of affiliative, coaching, and democratic. What are your thoughts? Anyway, I'm always trying to draw patterns between things. Personally, my dominant communication style is considerate. But these style theories aren't meant to put a box around us. They're simply a starting point to help us understand how people might communicate. Think of them like proto-personas. In fact, I mentioned my dominant style is considerate, which means that I might take a different approach in different situations, just like those leadership styles we talked about. The reality is most people are a mix of different styles and may switch up styles depending on context and situations. Now here's a question for you, and I'm sure you've already sensed it. Which style do you feel is the opposite of yours? Who do you tend not to get along with? I'm willing to guess it's the style that's diagonal to yours, according to that chart. People in diagonal quadrants tend to have polar opposite communication styles from each other. Direct and considerate butt heads, while spirited and systematic tend to butt heads. We can recognize the different styles that exist. Isn't that cool? This is the first step to being better communicators, simply understanding others first.
Holy moly, you made it! 4.5 hours of leveling up your UX research game. What a ride. Give yourselves a pat on the back. And thank you. Thank you for watching. Virtual high five. Whether you jumped around the video, skipped sections, or rewatched sections, I hope you found something to take away, something that was helpful and gave you a sense of the right mindset and some pro strategies to be that UX leader shaping the future of our field. But remember, this is just the beginning. Now that you've got a foundation, you can keep the momentum going. Like I said, this video is just a tiny fraction of my entire masterclass, which I spent 5 years on. So if you thought there was a lot in here, you'll love my masterclass. It's my baby. Like I said, I quit my job and went monk mode to make it. That's how serious I am about UX research education. So I invite you to check out my self-paced masterclass to dive even deeper and sharpen your skills. It's step-by-step, everything. I have a preview on my website there for you to watch. At least go check it out. Check out the curriculum, see what's in there. In it, you'll find extended lessons, real world case studies, actionable exercises, role-playing exercises designed to take you from good to great. And you know me, right? I will ask you real life scenarios. I want you do it, or you're not moving to the next lesson. So keep asking questions, stay curious. Most importantly, keep pushing yourself to be the kind of badass UX leader that sets the standard, not follows it. Thank you so much for watching. Mad love. Peace.